The wind rushed through the canyon like a warning, carrying dust, smoke, and the bitter smell of burned homes. Sarah pressed herself into a narrow space between two red rocks. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the soldiers below might hear it. She looked down at what had once been her Apache village. Everything was gone. The small homes were burned to the ground. The air was still thick with ash. Her people lay where they had fallen at sunrise, when the soldiers attacked without mercy. Sarah was only 18. She had run barefoot when the gunshots began. Her feet were cut and bleeding from sharp stones, and her simple dress was torn. But she held onto the small medicine pouch around her neck. Inside was a piece of turquoise and sacred herbs from her grandmother. It was the only thing she had left. Horses shook the ground below. She heard men's voices. "Spread out! Colonel wants every last one to be found. No survivors." Their voices were cold. They spoke about her people, like they were not human at all. Sarah bit her lip to keep from crying out. She tasted blood. Her body shook from fear and anger. Those men had taken everything. If they found her, they would kill her too. Hours passed. The sun dropped, and darkness covered the land. The soldiers' voices faded. She waited longer, afraid it was a trick. When the first stars appeared, she finally moved. The night air was cold, and she needed shelter. She climbed down, staying in the shadows. Her village was silent now, except for the soft crackle of dying fire. Sarah did not look at the bodies. She kept her eyes forward. There was nothing left for her down there. Her grandmother once spoke of a strange white man who lived high in the mountains, a man who had left his own people. Some said he was dangerous. Others said he was mad. But Sarah had nowhere else to go. The soldiers would not search the high mountains. She had a better chance with a lone hermit than with the men who destroyed her home. The climb was steep. Her legs felt weak. Stones cut her hands as she pulled herself up the dark slope. She had no food, no shoes, no blanket, and no plan. Only the hope that someone up there would not kill her on sight. By dawn, she was high above the canyon. The sun lit the land below, turning the rocks gold. She was dizzy, freezing, and almost ready to collapse. That was when she saw a thin line of smoke rising between the trees ahead. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant a person. Her heart raced. It could be help, or danger. The small cabin sat against the mountainside, almost hidden. A clear stream flowed nearby. Sarah stepped closer with careful steps. Every sound made her flinch. She did not see the man until he spoke behind her. "You're a long way from home, girl." Sarah spun around. A tall man stood a few feet away. His beard was gray, and his clothes were patched but clean. His pale blue eyes watched her with calm caution. He looked like he had lived on this mountain for many years. She did not speak. Her throat was too dry. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. His voice was rough, but not cruel. "Water," she whispered. He pointed to the stream. "Drink. It's safe." Quote. Sarah dropped to her knees at the water's edge and drank. The cold water eased the burn in her throat and made tears spill from her eyes. She stayed alert, watching him. Even while drinking, he waited. When she finished and looked up, he spoke again. "Name's Jake Morrison." "Sarah," she said softly. He studied her dusty face, torn dress and bleeding feet. "You need food and rest. Come inside if you want." Trusting a stranger went against everything she had been taught, but she was too weak to survive alone. She followed him to the cabin. Inside was simple but neat. A small fire burned in the stone fireplace. A table, a bed, shelves, and a rifle leaning against the wall told her this man lived alone. He warmed stew over the fire and handed her a wooden bowl. Sarah ate slowly so she would not get sick. It was the first food she had tasted since the attack. "You can't go back down there," Jake said. "Those men will look for survivors." "I know," Sarah whispered. "And up here alone, you won't make it long." He said it without harshness, only truth. Sarah looked around the small cabin. It felt safe, warmer than the stone she had hidden behind. But she did not know this man. White men had just destroyed her life. How could she trust one? You can stay here for a while, Jake said, only if you choose to, till you decide what to do next. Sarah stared into the fire. Why would you help me? Jake was silent for a moment. Because I know what it's like to lose everything, and to have nowhere else to go. He stood and pointed to the bed. You sleep there, I'll sleep by the fire. Sarah shook her head. I cannot take your bed. You can, and you will. You need real rest. She was too tired to argue. She lay on the bed, fully dressed. The warmth and soft blanket made her eyes heavy. Before sleep pulled her under, she asked, Those soldiers, did you know men like them? Quote. Jake looked into the fire. Yes, I used to be one of them. Sarah's eyes opened wide. Fear rose again in her chest. But not anymore, Jake said quietly. Not for a long time. The firelight flickered across his face. He looked tired, haunted, but not evil. Sarah didn't know if she could trust him. But tonight, she was alive because of him, and for now, that was enough. Sarah woke to the soft crackle of the fire. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The warmth, the wooden ceiling above her, the faint smell of stew. It felt like a dream. Then the memories rushed back, and her heart tightened. The village, the soldiers, the climb, the stranger. Jake was already awake, sitting near the fire and sharpening a small knife. He looked up when she moved. Morning, you slept hard. Sarah sat up slowly. Her body ached everywhere, but she felt stronger than the night before. Jake placed a cup of warm tea on the table. Drink, he said. It'll help. She wrapped her hands around the cup. The heat brought comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Jake stayed quiet, giving her space. When she finished, he finally spoke. You said yesterday your village was attacked. You the only one left? Quote. Sarah stared into the empty cup. I was gathering herbs in the hills. When I returned, everything was smoke and fire. They killed everyone. Jake nodded once, not in coldness, but in a way that showed he understood loss. I'm sorry, he said. Sarah looked at him, searching for any sign of false pity. But his voice was steady and real. He had known loss, too. She could see it in his eyes. He stood. You need shoes. And your feet need cleaning. Before she could protest, he carried a bucket of water inside and set it near the fire to warm. Sarah watched him carefully. He moved with patience, not force. When the water was warm, he knelt. I will do it myself, she said quickly, not wanting him to touch her. Jake nodded and pushed the bucket closer. Use that cloth, clean the cuts, then wrap them. He handed her soft cloth strips he had saved for bandages. Sarah cleaned her feet. The sting made her clench her jaw, but the warmth eased the pain. Jake stepped outside to give her privacy. When she finished, she tied the bandages and stood. Her legs still shook, but she felt better. Outside, the morning sun lit the mountain. Jake handed her a pair of old boots. They're big, but they'll do until I make you better ones. Sarah slipped them on. They were worn, but solid. Why do you live up here alone? She asked. Jake stared out toward the trees. The world down there stopped feeling like home. Sometimes a man runs so far from pain he ends up on a mountaintop. He started walking, and Sarah followed. He showed her the small garden he kept for vegetables, the place he trapped rabbits, and the path that led to a clear spring. If you stay, Jake said, you'll need to know your way around. Sarah paused. You want me to stay? Quote. His answer was a slow breath. Only if you choose to. No one had given her a choice in anything for a long time. The village was her home because she was born there. Her life had been shaped by elders, traditions, and duty. But here, she felt something new, something like control, even if fragile. They gathered herbs and plants together that morning. Sarah showed him leaves that healed pain, roots that eased fever, and berries that could be eaten or crushed for color. You know more than most, Jake said. My grandmother taught me. She said the earth gives us what we need if we respect it. Jake listened carefully. Unlike many white men she had seen before, he did not mock her ways or interrupt. He asked questions as if her knowledge mattered. Back at the cabin, she helped cook a simple meal with the herbs they found. They ate in calm silence. As she watched Jake, she studied his face. She tried to picture him as a soldier, cold, cruel, like the men who burned her home, but instead she saw a man tired of pain, a man who carried his past like a stone. After the meal, he spoke quietly. "You should know something about me. I wasn't always the man I am now." Sarah stayed still, her heart thudded. "I joined the army after my wife and daughter were killed," Jake said. "I wanted revenge. I thought hurting others would make the pain go away. It didn't. It only made me someone I didn't recognize." "You left," Sarah said. "Yes, but leaving didn't erase what I saw, or what I allowed." His voice shook for the first time. Sarah felt torn. A part of her wanted to hate him, to see him as the same as the men who destroyed her life. But another part saw the truth. He was broken too. As the day faded, Jake made space on the floor with blankets. "You take the bed again," he said. Sarah shook her head. "I can sleep on the floor tonight." Jake paused, then spoke softly. "You are safe here, Sarah. I sleep near the fire because I am used to it, not because you don't belong in the bed." She looked into his eyes. They were steady, kind. He was not claiming her, not ordering her, only offering comfort. Before Sarah slept, she whispered, "Thank you." Jake nodded once, then faced the fire. She lay in the bed, but this time she did not fall asleep alone in fear. The fire warmed her, and the presence of someone who understood loss eased the tightness in her chest. For the first time since the attack, she slept without nightmares. The mountain was quiet outside, but inside the cabin, two wounded souls had begun to find a fragile peace in each other's company. The days that followed felt peaceful in a way Sarah had never expected. She helped Jake tend the garden, learned how he hunted, and taught him which herbs healed sickness. They spoke more each night, sharing small pieces of their lives. Slowly, trust began to grow between them. One evening, as the sky turned orange behind the mountains, Sarah sat by the fire with her medicine pouch in her hands. Jake noticed the way she held it, as if it carried her whole heart inside. "What's in it?" he asked gently. Sarah opened the pouch and poured the items into her palm. "My grandmother gave me this. She said it would guide me when I was lost." Jake leaned forward. Inside was a small piece of turquoise, dried herbs, and a small gold cross. Jake picked up the cross and turned it carefully. "Your father's?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "I never knew him. He left before I could remember him." Jake ran his thumb over the back of the cross and paused. "There are letters here, RM, and a year. Maybe his name?" Sarah looked at him. "Maybe, but he is not part of my life. This," she closed her hand around the pouch, "is all I have of my family now." Quote, Jake did not push for more. Instead, he said softly, "Your home may be gone, but your people live here." He touched his chest. "In your heart. In what you carry." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She looked at Jake and whispered, "You talk like my grandmother." Jake smiled faintly. Seems she was a wise woman. As the weeks passed, Sarah healed. The fear in her eyes faded. She laughed sometimes, especially when Jake tried to cook without her help and burned the food. He pretended not to see her hiding her smile, but he saw, and it warmed something inside him that had been cold for years. One night, after a long day of gathering berries, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Jake by the fire. She spoke softly, but her words changed everything. "Jake, what are we to each other?" Quote. Jake froze. He had wondered the same thing every night, but he feared pushing too far. He looked into her eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I don't want to be alone anymore." Sarah's voice shook. "I don't want to be alone either." Quote, Jake stood slowly and walked to the side of the bed. He didn't touch her at first. He just stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You can sleep here beside me now," he said in a low, careful voice. Not as a command, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Sarah looked up, full of fear, hope, and something deeper. She nodded. That night, they lay side by side under the blankets, fully clothed, holding onto each other, taking a step that felt both gentle and powerful. Jake's arm wrapped around her shoulders, and Sarah rested her head against his chest. For the first time, she felt safe in someone's arms. "You're sleeping beside me now," he whispered, full of wonder. "I never thought I'd have this again." Sarah closed her eyes. "And I never thought I'd find someone who saw me as more than a survivor." They fell asleep like that, holding onto a warmth neither had felt in years. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the cabin, but something felt different. Sarah stepped outside to fetch water and froze. 3 riders were coming up the trail. Jake saw her face change and followed her outside. He grabbed his rifle. "Get inside," he said. Sarah stayed near the door, watching with her heart in her throat. The riders stopped a short distance away. The man in front raised his hand. "Jake Morrison?" he called. Jake's jaw tightened. "Who's asking?" "Name's Tom Patterson, U.S. Marshal. I need to speak with you." Jake lowered his rifle, but his body stayed tense. He walked partway down the rocky path. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching every move. Tom Patterson told him that the government wanted the truth about a terrible attack years ago, an attack Jake had witnessed. They needed him to testify. Jake stood still, his face pale. Sarah realized Jake had a past much darker than she knew. If he went with them, he might never come back. That night, Jake sat by the fire, silent and troubled. Sarah sat across from him. The cabin felt heavy with questions. Finally, she spoke. "You don't have to tell me what happened, but you must decide what kind of man you want to be now." Jake stared at the flames. "If I speak, I may be arrested. I may never return." Sarah's heart squeezed. "Then I will wait, but you must do what is right for your soul. If you stay because of fear, we will both lose something precious." Jake leaned forward, his voice trembling. "I don't want to leave you." Sarah reached across the space between them and touched his hand. "If you stay by running from your past, the man I love will disappear anyway." Jake's eyes filled with emotion. "You love me?" Sarah nodded, tears forming. "Yes, and that is why you must go." The next morning, Jake packed a small bag. Before he left, he pulled Sarah into his arms and whispered, "If I live through this, I will return to you, I promise." Sarah held on to him tightly. "I will wait." Jake kissed her gently, then walked down the mountain with the marshal. He did not look back. Days turned into months. Months into years. Sarah lived alone in the cabin, holding on to hope. She never stopped believing. 3 years later, on an autumn morning, she looked up the mountain trail and saw a familiar figure walking toward her with tired steps and gray in his hair. Jake was home. Sarah ran to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground. "You waited," he whispered. "I told you I would," she said. That night, they lay together again in the same bed. No fear, no distance. Jake kissed her forehead. "You're sleeping beside me now," he said with a full heart, "and I will never leave you again." They had both survived, they had both healed, and now they had each other forever.